Welcome back, car lovers. If you thought we'd covered all the worst cars of the 1950s, think again. Today we're diving into 7 more of the dumbest and worst cars that somehow made it onto the roads during this iconic decade. From poor designs to downright bizarre concepts, these cars will leave you scratching your head. Let's jump in. First on our list is the 1958 Edsel Ranger from the United States, a car that has become synonymous with automotive failure. Ford invested an extraordinary amount of resources into the Edsel brand, envisioning it as a revolutionary line that would bridge the gap between their mid-range and luxury models. However, the reality was far less impressive, and the Edsel Ranger quickly became a cautionary tale in the auto industry. The Edsel Ranger's design was one of its most controversial aspects. Ford aimed to create a car that stood out from the crowd, but the result was a polarizing design that missed the mark for most consumers. The Ranger's front grille, often referred to as a horse collar or toilet seat, was particularly divisive. This unique vertical grille, designed to be distinctive, ended up being one of the car's most criticized features. Instead of appearing modern and sleek, the grille gave the Ranger an odd, almost awkward look that turned off potential buyers. The rest of the car's design didn't fare much better, with a mix of curves and angles that felt disjointed and uninspired. Beyond its aesthetic missteps, the Edsel Ranger also suffered from being overpriced. When it was released in 1958, it was positioned as a mid-range car, but its pricing often overlapped with more established and better-regarded models from Ford and other competitors. Consumers struggled to see what justified the Ranger's price tag, especially since it didn't offer any significant improvements in performance, comfort, or features. The car was equipped with a standard V8 engine, which was competent but not remarkable, and its driving dynamics were average at best. There was nothing about the Ranger that truly set it apart from other vehicles in its class. Another major issue with the Edsel Ranger was the timing of its release. The car was introduced during a recession, when consumers were becoming more budget-conscious and less inclined to spend money on what was perceived as an unnecessary luxury. The economic downturn meant that buyers were looking for value and reliability rather than style and status, and the Edsel, with its higher price and underwhelming features, failed to meet these needs. The car's sales were dismal from the start, and the negative public perception quickly snowballed, making it nearly impossible for Ford to recover the brand's reputation. The Edsel Ranger also faced significant quality control issues. Many of the early models were plagued by mechanical problems, including issues with the transmission, electrical system, and overall assembly. These defects only served to reinforce the public's growing distrust of the Edsel brand. The combination of poor design, high price, and unreliable performance made the Ranger a hard sell, and it quickly became apparent that the Edsel was not living up to its hype. Ford's marketing campaign for the Edsel also contributed to its failure. The company had hyped the Edsel as a car that would redefine the automotive market, but the actual product fell far short of these grand promises. When the car finally hit the market, consumers were left disappointed, feeling that they had been misled by the advertising. The Edsel's launch became one of the most infamous marketing blunders in automotive history, as the gap between expectation and reality was too wide to bridge. In the end, the Edsel Ranger was discontinued after just a few years on the market, and the entire Edsel brand was phased out by 1960. The failure of the Edsel Ranger, along with other models in the line, led to significant financial losses for Ford and became a textbook example of how even the most well-funded and well-intentioned projects can go awry. The Edsel Ranger remains a symbol of automotive failure, a reminder that innovation and bold design choices must be balanced with practicality, reliability, and a deep understanding of consumer needs. Today, the 1958 Edsel Ranger is often cited in discussions of the biggest flops in automotive history. While it has gained a certain level of notoriety, and even a niche collector's market due to its infamy, the Ranger is a far cry from the game-changing vehicle Ford had hoped it would be. Instead, it serves as a case study in how not to launch a new car brand, earning its place as one of the most significant automotive failures of the 1950s. Next up is the 1957 Trabant P50 from East Germany, a car that has become emblematic of the shortcomings of Soviet-era engineering and the stark realities of life behind the Iron Curtain. The Trabant P50, like its successors, is often remembered for its poor build quality, underwhelming performance, and a design that seemed to reflect the austerity of its time rather than any aspirations toward innovation or luxury. The Trabant P50 was conceived as a practical and affordable vehicle for the masses, intended to put East Germany on wheels. However, the reality was far from ideal. The car's body was made from Duraplast, a cheap and lightweight material composed of waste cotton and phenol resins. While this material choice was practical, given the resource constraints of East Germany, it came with significant downsides. Duraplast, while resistant to rust, was brittle and offered little in the way of structural integrity. The car was notoriously flimsy, with panels that could be easily dented and a body that offered minimal protection in the event of a collision. This made the Trabant P50 not only uncomfortable, but also potentially unsafe for its occupants. Under the hood, the Trabant P50 was powered by a tiny two-stroke engine that produced a meager 18 horsepower. This engine, while simple and easy to repair, was woefully underpowered, making the car sluggish and frustrating to drive. The P50 struggled to keep up with traffic, particularly on highways, and its acceleration was glacial. The engine's two-stroke design also meant that it emitted a distinctive and unpleasant smoky exhaust, contributing to the Trabant's reputation as a polluter. Moreover, the engine's reliability was questionable, with frequent breakdowns and mechanical issues being a common complaint among Trabant owners. The interior of the Trabant P50 was as Spartan as its exterior. The cabin was cramped, with minimal amenities and uncomfortable seating. There was little in the way of sound insulation, making for a noisy and harsh ride. The car's suspension was rudimentary, leading to a bumpy and jarring driving experience, especially on the rough roads that were common in East Germany at the time. The P50 was designed to be functional, but it offered none of the comfort or convenience features that were becoming standard in Western cars of the same era. Despite its many flaws, the Trabant P50 was a necessary mode of transportation for many East Germans. In a society where consumer choice was severely limited, owning a car like the Trabant was often a matter of necessity rather than preference. The long waiting lists for new cars, the scarcity of alternatives, and the lack of personal mobility options meant that many East Germans had little choice but to accept the Trabant, flaws and all. As a result, the P50 became an unavoidable part of daily life in East Germany, more infamous than beloved. The Trabant P50's legacy is a complex one. On the one hand, it represents the resourcefulness and ingenuity that were necessary to produce a car under the constraints of a planned economy. On the other hand, it is a symbol of the inefficiencies and limitations of that same system, a reminder of how far East German automotive technology lagged behind its Western counterparts. The Trabant P50, with its combination of poor build quality, underpowered engine, and uncomfortable ride, stands as one of the most infamous cars of the 1950s. More remembered for its shortcomings than any contributions to automotive history. Today, the Trabant P50 is often viewed with a mix of nostalgia and derision. While it has achieved a certain cult status among collectors and enthusiasts of Soviet-era memorabilia, it is also widely recognized as one of the most poorly made and least desirable cars of its time. The P50's enduring infamy is a testament to the challenges of life in East Germany and the compromises that ordinary people had to make in the face of limited choices. The Trabant P50 is not just a car, it is a relic of a bygone era, a tangible reminder of the division of Europe during the Cold War, and a symbol of the resilience of those who had to make do with what they had. Coming in at number 3 is the 1950 Kaiser Fraser Henry J from the USA, a car that serves as a cautionary tale about the dangers of excessive cost-cutting in automotive design. The Henry J was conceived as an affordable, no-frills vehicle aimed at budget-conscious buyers in the post-war era. Unfortunately, the quest to keep costs down led to a series of compromises that ultimately undermined the car's appeal and made it a prime example of how cutting corners can backfire. The Henry J was introduced by the Kaiser Fraser Corporation, a company that had emerged in the wake of World War II with ambitious plans to challenge the dominance of Detroit's Big Three automakers. Henry J. Kaiser, the industrialist behind the company, believed that there was a market for a simple, low-cost car that would be accessible to a wide range of American consumers. To achieve this, the Henry J was designed with an emphasis on affordability. stripping away many of the features and amenities that were standard on other cars of the time. One of the most notable omissions on the Henry J was the lack of a trunk lid. To access the trunk, drivers had to fold down the rear seat, a design choice that was highly inconvenient and unpopular. This cost-cutting measure was intended to save money on production, but it quickly became a major drawback in the eyes of consumers, who were accustomed to the convenience of a traditional trunk. The absence of a trunk lid made loading and unloading cargo a cumbersome task and highlighted the car's bare-bones nature. Inside the car, the cost-cutting was even more apparent. The Henry J's interior was incredibly Spartan, with minimal upholstery, no glove compartment, and a dashboard that was devoid of any frills. The seats were basic and offered little in the way of comfort, while the overall fit and finish of the interior left much to be desired. The car's simplicity was intended to appeal to those looking for a practical utilitarian vehicle, but in practice, it just made the Henry J feel cheap and unfinished. Under the hood, the Henry J was powered by a small, 4-cylinder engine that provided adequate but uninspiring performance. The car was designed to be lightweight and fuel-efficient, but its modest power output meant that it struggled to keep up with traffic, especially on highways. The handling was also subpar, with the car's light weight contributing to a bouncy and unsettled ride. While the Henry J was marketed as an economical choice, its lackluster performance and uncomfortable driving experience left much to be desired. In terms of styling, the Henry J was unremarkable. The car's design was functional but bland, lacking the visual appeal that might have helped it stand out in a crowded market. The plain exterior, combined with the bare-bones interior, gave the Henry J an aura of austerity that failed to resonate with buyers who were looking for more than just the basics. In an era when consumers were increasingly drawn to cars that offered style, comfort, and performance, the Henry J's utilitarian approach made it seem out of step with the times. Despite its flaws, the Henry J did find some success among budget-conscious buyers, and it did help Kaiser Fraser stay afloat for a few more years. However, it quickly became clear that consumers were willing to pay a little more for cars that offered better value. Competing models from other manufacturers, which featured more amenities, better performance, and more appealing designs, ultimately overshadowed the Henry J. As a result, sales of the Henry J declined sharply, and the car was discontinued after only a few years on the market. The Henry J is a classic example of how cutting corners in the name of cost savings can ultimately backfire. While the car was affordable, it was also seen as a compromise, and buyers quickly realized they could get more for their money elsewhere. The Henry J's failure to strike the right balance between affordability and value serves as a reminder that even in the budget segment, consumers expect a certain level of quality and convenience. Today, the Henry J is remembered more for its shortcomings than for any contributions it made to the automotive industry, standing as a symbol of the pitfalls of overzealous cost-cutting. Next on our list is the 1959 Sima Videt from France, a car that serves as a poignant example of how clinging to outdated designs and underwhelming engineering can spell the end of a model's relevance in a rapidly evolving market. Originally conceived as a Ford project, the Videt was a product of the post-war period when Ford sought to expand its influence in Europe. However, after Ford divested from its French operations, Sima, a rising star in the French automotive industry, took over the Videt and continued its production with minimal changes. By 1959, however, the car had become a relic of a bygone era, struggling to find its place in a market that was quickly leaving it behind. The Sima Videt had its roots in the late 1940s when it was designed by Ford to be a mid-sized family car that could bridge the gap between the smaller, more economical vehicles popular in Europe and the larger, more luxurious American cars. When Sima acquired the rights to the Videt in 1954, they initially saw it as an opportunity to offer a more upscale model in their lineup. However, the car's design, which had been innovative in the early 1950s, began to show its age by the end of the decade. By 1959, the Videt's styling was decidedly outdated. The car retained the bulbous, rounded shapes that were characteristic of the early post-war years, with a pronounced grille and large chrome-laden bumpers. While this design had once been seen as modern and elegant, it appeared increasingly old-fashioned, as the late 1950s ushered in a new era of automotive design that favored sharper lines, lower profiles, and a more streamlined aesthetic. The Videt's appearance was further hampered by its somewhat awkward proportions, which gave it a chunky, heavy-set look that was out of step with the sleeker, more aerodynamic designs emerging from other manufacturers. Under the hood, the Videt was powered by a small V8 engine, which was relatively rare for European cars of the time. While the idea of a V8 might suggest robust performance, the reality was far less impressive. The engine was underpowered, producing modest horsepower that left the car struggling to deliver the kind of acceleration and speed that buyers were beginning to expect from even mid-sized vehicles. This lack of power was compounded by the car's considerable weight, which made it feel sluggish and unresponsive on the road. The Videt's driving experience was further marred by its outdated suspension and handling characteristics. The car's ride was soft and floaty, which might have been acceptable in the early 1950s, but by 1959 it felt disconnected and imprecise. The steering was vague and the brakes were not particularly effective, leading to a driving experience that was far from confidence-inspiring. As European roads and driving habits evolved, with an increasing emphasis on performance and driver engagement, the Videt's shortcomings became more apparent. In terms of interior design, the Videt also failed to keep pace with its competitors. While it offered a reasonably spacious cabin, the materials and fit and finish were below the standard that consumers were coming to expect, even in mid-range cars. The dashboard layout was cluttered and uninspired, and the overall sense of refinement was lacking. Comfort features were sparse, and the car did little to differentiate itself from the newer, more modern models flooding the market. Perhaps most damning was the Videt's reputation for reliability, or rather, the lack thereof. Mechanical issues were not uncommon, and the car was prone to a variety of faults, from engine troubles to electrical problems. In a market where reliability was becoming an increasingly important factor in purchasing decisions, the Videt's track record did it no favors. As a result, what might have been forgiven as eccentricities in an earlier time became significant drawbacks that turned potential buyers away. The automotive landscape of the late 1950s was one of rapid change, with manufacturers across Europe and the United States pushing the boundaries of design, performance, and innovation. Unfortunately for Simca, the Videt was a car that had been left behind by these changes. Its outdated design, uninspiring performance, and questionable reliability made it a tough sell in a market that was moving forward at a brisk pace. By the early 1960s, the Videt had faded into obscurity, and it was eventually discontinued, becoming a largely forgotten chapter in automotive history. Today, the 1959 Simca Videt is remembered more as a footnote than a milestone. It serves as a reminder of the dangers of failing to adapt in an industry where change is constant and relentless. While it might have had a place in the earlier part of the decade, by 1959, the Videt was a car out of time, unable to compete with the new wave of vehicles that were shaping the future of motoring. At number 5 is the 1954 Nash Metropolitan, a vehicle that represents one of the more unusual chapters in mid-20th century automotive history. The Metropolitan was born from a joint venture between the United States and the United Kingdom, a collaboration that aimed to create a small, economical car tailored for the post-war consumer. Despite the good intentions behind its design, the Metropolitan struggled to find its place in the market, especially in the United States, where it was often seen as a novelty rather than a serious competitor. The Nash Metropolitan was conceived at a time when the American automobile market was dominated by large, powerful cars. In contrast, the Metropolitan was tiny, with a wheelbase of just 85 inches and an overall length of only 149.5 inches. It was almost toy-like in its dimensions, particularly when compared to the massive sedans and coupes that were the norm in the US at the time. The car was available in both hardtop and convertible versions, and it featured a two-tone paint scheme that added to its cute, almost whimsical appearance. Despite its diminutive size, the Metropolitan was designed to be a practical, economical vehicle. It was powered by a small 1.2-liter or 1.5-liter inline-4 engine, depending on the model year, which produced between 42 and 55 horsepower. This might have been sufficient for the narrow, winding roads of Europe, but in America, where highways and long distances were the norm, the Metropolitan's limited power quickly became a liability. The car was slow to accelerate, with a top speed of around 70 mph, making it ill-suited for highway driving. Its small engine also struggled with hills and steep inclines, further limiting its appeal to American drivers who were accustomed to more powerful engines. The interior of the Metropolitan was also a far cry from the spacious cabins found in most American cars. The car was designed as a two-seater, with just enough room for the driver and one passenger. The interior was simple and utilitarian, with basic controls and minimal trim. While this simplicity might have been appealing to some buyers looking for an economical runabout, it didn't offer much in the way of comfort or luxury. The car's small size also meant limited cargo space, with just a tiny trunk accessible from behind the rear seat. In terms of handling, the Metropolitan was agile and easy to maneuver, especially in tight urban environments. However, its small wheels and short wheelbase made it susceptible to rough roads and potholes, resulting in a bumpy ride. The car's light weight also contributed to a lack of stability at higher speeds, which further limited its appeal for long-distance driving. While it excelled as a city car, its limitations became apparent as soon as the road opened up. One of the biggest challenges the Metropolitan faced was its reception in the American market. At a time when bigger was often seen as better, the Metropolitan's small size and modest performance didn't resonate with the average American car buyer. It was seen as something of an oddity, a car that didn't quite fit into the landscape of V8 engines and chrome-laden behemoths. While it found some success in niche markets, particularly among urban drivers and those looking for a second car, it never gained widespread popularity. Despite its commercial struggles, the Nash Metropolitan has enjoyed a resurgence in popularity in recent years. Its distinctive looks and quirky character have made it a favorite among collectors and classic car enthusiasts. The car's compact dimensions, which were once seen as a disadvantage, are now appreciated for their charm and uniqueness. The Metropolitan has become a symbol of a different era in automotive design, a time when manufacturers were willing to take risks and experiment with new ideas, even if those ideas didn't always pay off. Today, the Metropolitan is remembered more fondly than it was during its production run. It has a dedicated cult following, with owners and enthusiasts celebrating its place in automotive history. The car's cute, retro styling and simplicity have made it a sought-after classic, with well-preserved examples commanding respectable prices at auctions. In hindsight, the Metropolitan's failure to capture the mass market is seen not as a flaw, but as a reflection of its unique position in the automotive world. In conclusion, the 1954 Nash Metropolitan was a car that was ahead of its time in some ways, but also out of step with the prevailing trends of its era. Its small size, limited power, and quirky design made it a tough sell in the US, where it was often dismissed as an oddity. However, its enduring appeal as a classic car shows that sometimes the most unconventional designs can leave a lasting impression. The Metropolitan might not have been a commercial success, but it has secured a place in automotive history as one of the more interesting and distinctive cars of the 1950s. Next on our list is the 1953 Fiat 1100-103 from Italy, a car that, despite being a part of Fiat's popular 1100 series, failed to capture the excitement and innovation that characterized the automotive industry in the 1950s. The Fiat 1100-103 was introduced as a continuation of the Fiat 1100 line, which had been a mainstay in the Italian market for years. However, the 103 version, while practical and reliable, was often seen as a disappointment due to its uninspired design and lackluster performance. The Fiat 1100-103 featured a design that was, at best, functional. It was characterized by its boxy utilitarian shape, which lacked the flair and elegance that many Italian cars of the time were known for. While the 1100-103 wasn't an unattractive car, it was far from eye-catching. Its design was conservative, with clean but unremarkable lines that didn't set it apart from other vehicles on the road. In an era when automotive design was becoming more adventurous and expressive, the Fiat 1100-103's plain appearance did little to excite potential buyers. Under the hood, the Fiat 1100-103 was powered by a 1.1-liter inline-4 engine that produced around 36 horsepower. While this engine was adequate for city driving and short trips, it was underpowered by the standards of the time, especially as more powerful and efficient engines were becoming the norm. The 1100-103's performance was decidedly average, with modest acceleration and a top speed that lagged behind many of its contemporaries. This lack of power made it a less appealing option for drivers looking for a car that could handle longer distances or more demanding driving conditions. In terms of innovation, the Fiat 103 didn't offer much that was new or groundbreaking. While it was built using Fiat's traditional unibody construction, which contributed to its reputation for durability and solid handling, it didn't introduce any significant advancements in automotive technology. The car's suspension, braking, and transmission systems were all fairly standard for the time, offering competent but unremarkable performance. In a decade when car manufacturers were pushing the boundaries with new features and designs, the 103 felt like a step back rather than a step forward. The interior of the Fiat 103 was similarly underwhelming. It was designed with practicality in mind, featuring a straightforward layout with basic controls and instrumentation. The materials used were functional but not particularly luxurious, and the overall feel of the cabin was one of simplicity rather than comfort. While the car provided adequate space for passengers, it didn't offer the level of refinement or amenities that were becoming more common in cars of the era. This no-frills approach may have appealed to some buyers, but it didn't do much to elevate the car's status or desirability. Despite its shortcomings, the Fiat 103 did have some positive attributes. It was known for its reliability and ease of maintenance, qualities that made it a popular choice for families and budget-conscious drivers. The car's small size and light weight also made it economical to run, with good fuel efficiency for the time. Additionally, the 103's compact dimensions and nimble handling made it well-suited for driving in crowded urban environments, where larger cars might struggle to navigate narrow streets and tight parking spaces. However, these strengths weren't enough to make the Fiat 103 stand out in a decade that was seeing rapid advancements in automotive technology and design. While it was a practical and reliable car, it lacked the excitement and innovation that many buyers were looking for. As a result, the 103 didn't leave a lasting impression, and it struggled to compete with more dynamic and stylish vehicles from other manufacturers. In hindsight, the Fiat 103 is remembered more for its role as a dependable workhorse than as a standout model in the Fiat lineup. It didn't capture the imagination of car enthusiasts, and it failed to make a significant impact on the automotive world. While it served its purpose as a practical, everyday vehicle, it's not a car that's often celebrated or remembered with great fondness. In conclusion, the 1953 Fiat 103 was a car that did little to distinguish itself in an era of rapid automotive progress. Its bland design, mediocre performance, and lack of innovation made it a forgettable entry in the Fiat catalog. While it was reliable and practical, it didn't offer anything that set it apart from the competition, and it ultimately faded into the background of automotive history. The Fiat 103 is a reminder that even in the world of cars, playing it safe doesn't always pay off. Rounding out our list is the 1951 Ford Taunus 12M from Germany, a car that was intended to meet the needs of a recovering post-war Europe, but ultimately failed to live up to its promise. The Taunus 12M was Ford's attempt to produce a compact and affordable car that could capture the imagination of the German market. Unfortunately, this model became more of a headache than a success story, plagued by outdated styling, frequent mechanical issues, and an inability to compete effectively in a rapidly evolving automotive landscape. The Ford Taunus 12M's design was one of its most glaring weaknesses. Launched in 1951, the car featured a styling approach that was already beginning to feel dated. Its rounded, bulbous shape, which might have been appealing a decade earlier, did little to attract buyers in a market that was increasingly favoring more modern, streamlined designs. The front end, with its modest grille and simple headlights, lacked the boldness or innovation that other manufacturers were starting to embrace. As a result, the Taunus 12M didn't stand out visually and failed to make a strong impression on potential buyers. Under the hood, the Taunus 12M was powered by a 1.2-liter inline-4 engine that produced around 38 horsepower. While this might have been sufficient for a basic economy car, the engine's performance left much to be desired. The car was slow to accelerate, with a top speed that was unremarkable even by the standards of the early 1950s. This lack of power made the Taunus 12M less appealing to drivers who were looking for a car that could handle more than just short trips around town. The sluggish performance was a significant drawback in a market where consumers were beginning to demand more from their vehicles. Mechanical reliability was another area where the Ford Taunus 12M fell short. The car was notorious for its frequent mechanical issues, which ranged from engine problems to issues with the transmission and suspension. These reliability concerns made the Taunus 12M a less attractive option for buyers who wanted a dependable vehicle. In the post-war German market, where economic conditions were still challenging, a car that required frequent repairs was a tough sell. The Taunus 12M's reputation for being troublesome to maintain contributed to its struggles in gaining a foothold among consumers. The interior of the Ford Taunus 12M was functional, but far from luxurious. Designed with affordability in mind, the car featured a simple, no-frills cabin that lacked the comfort and amenities found in more upscale models. The materials used in the interior were basic, and the overall design was utilitarian rather than stylish. While this approach may have kept costs down, it didn't do much to endear the car to buyers who were looking for something more refined. The Spartan interior reflected the car's budget-conscious design, but also underscored its limitations in appealing to a broader audience. In a market that was becoming increasingly competitive, the Ford Taunus 12M struggled to keep up. Other manufacturers were introducing cars with more modern designs, better performance, and greater reliability, making it difficult for the Taunus 12M to stand out. Ford had hoped that the car would appeal to the growing number of consumers who were looking for affordable transportation in the post-war period, but the Taunus 12M's shortcomings made it a less attractive option compared to its rivals. As a result, the car didn't achieve the level of success that Ford had anticipated. Despite its best intentions, the Ford Taunus 12M failed to make a lasting impact on the automotive market. It was a car that struggled with a number of significant flaws, from its outdated styling and underwhelming performance to its mechanical reliability issues. These problems made it difficult for the Taunus 12M to compete effectively, and it ultimately failed to live up to Ford's expectations. While the car did find some buyers, it never achieved the widespread popularity that Ford had hoped for. Today, the Ford Taunus 12M is largely remembered as a misstep in Ford's history, a car that represents the challenges of trying to balance affordability with quality and appeal. It serves as a reminder that even established automakers can face difficulties when attempting to meet the demands of a changing market. The Taunus 12M's struggles highlight the importance of innovation, reliability, and design in creating a car that can stand the test of time. And there you have it. 7 more of the dumbest and worst cars from the 1950s. Some of these cars were attempts to cut costs, while others were just poorly executed ideas. Which one surprised you the most? Let us know in the comments below. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell so you never miss an episode. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.